Live on WFLA Now. This is Run for Fun with running enthusiast Leigh Spann.
All right, let's go. Welcome back to the Stream Center for this week's episode of Run for Fun. This show is designed to help, the veteran runners remember that this is supposed to be our hobby and that it's supposed to bring us joy and not to get so bogged down in the training and forget to have the fun. But you know what? It's also a show for beginner runners so that you know just how much joy this sport can bring you. I'm your host, meteorologist Leigh Spann at WFLA in Tampa. I've been running consistently for about 14 years now, and I can tell you I was the first to fall victim to a lot of these pitfalls that steal the joy of your running, but I've been lucky to surround myself with some joyful runners, and that way I always find my way back. And of course, Coach Maria, one of those joyful runners in my life. How have you been?
Oh, good. I'm so glad you talked about the veteran runner because I wrote an article one time for a magazine about how much veteran runners can learn from beginner runners, because veteran runners often lose that excitement that happens when you're a first time runner. So it's nice to bring it back sometimes.
Yeah, because I mean, when you're just starting, everything's new and exciting. You're getting new outfits, you're getting new clothes, and you're learning so much that that excitement stays up. And then just like as we talked about, a marriage or long-term career, in the end, it's easy to just get caught up in, okay, got to do this now, got to do this now.
Yeah.
It's like, remember that there's supposed to be joy in all of it.
Yeah. The roller coaster that is running and life, right?
Yes. Very, very similar. So, we were just talking before we started the show. Kind of sad that the Olympics is over, but I was like, on the flip side of that, I can actually, I feel like I can be productive again. I mean, I would sit down and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to watch this one event, and then hours would go by and I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go to bed now.
Well, and it's funny because it was like the busiest 2 weeks that I've had in probably in an entire year. And I was in the back of my mind just saying, okay, you can record everything, you can watch it later, but then my phone would just blow up and people would be like, did you see that race? Oh my gosh, we got gold. And I'm like, stop. I literally turned my notifications off so people would stop telling me what happened because I couldn't watch it all live. So I get to not have that expectation in the back of my head, like I'm missing this.
Because I was really lucky. My schedule is not one that I often call lucky because I have to miss so many things in the evening because I'm usually sleeping. But I got prime viewing. I mean, my post-work time was when all of those events were going on live from like noon to 6. And
it's like the one time you're lucky, Leigh.
Exactly. And I took about every day. I went home, parked myself on the couch, got my dog next to me, got some snacks, and I watched.
Did you have a favorite race that you watched in the track and field? Was there a favorite?
The 4x400 women's.
That was pretty cool.
When Sydney took off in that second, the second leg of it, and within what I felt was a blink of an eye, she was halfway around that track, and they couldn't, as someone in the media, they couldn't even keep them all in the shot together. They kept having to widen the shot out, which usually this is a very tight race. I mean, it's the best women of all around the world running together, and the whole team just. Finished so far ahead. It was
fun to watch.
What about you?
My favorite was the men's 1500. I think I watched that race no less than 15 times. Like I just couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. I love a good negative split anyway, but I was just like, wow, those USA boys did so well. Like it was just so fun to watch it. I don't want to say anything in case you haven't watched it. You should go back and watch it if you haven't watched it.
Well, and the 5K where I was like, oh, well, Grant, okay, like he's going to get fourth or fifth. And the kick that he had in that last 25 meters, unbelievable. And then one more thing, and then we can actually talk about our topic for the day. Sisson Hassan.
I know, that was a crazy race.
Who medaled in the 5K, got a bronze, medaled in the 10K, I believe the next day or maybe 2 days later, medaled and got a bronze. The next day, won the marathon in one of the hardest courses of any Olympics ever. I can't imagine how tired her legs were.
And she was so funny beforehand, like all the negative self-talk she had. And I
Yes.
just loved how authentic she was because so many times, so many athletes are like, oh, I was thinking so positively and I know I can do it. And this is my last chance. And she was like, I was thinking to myself, how am I so silly to be running a marathon?
Yes.
It was funny.
And, yeah, and you thought, okay, she'd said to somebody, I just want to finish. And you think, well, but wouldn't
Yeah.
you? I mean, because she would be the only person to have ever,
Yeah.
only woman ever to have done that. Um,
Yeah.
and then, she's kind of hanging with the lead group. And I just kept waiting for her legs to give out and for her to pull back. And then for her to sprint at the end. I just,
How'd you like that little body check at the end? That was
yeah.
pretty crazy where
Yeah. Oh,
Ethiopia just was like, tried to take her off the course. I'm like,
no.
I know this stuff happens, but if she had fallen, I mean,
Yeah.
she would have been disqualified. Ethiopia would have been disqualified in that case, but it just was a little bit rough that she basically tried to push her off the shit.
Yeah. Well, and, and your legs are kind of like jello anyway. You've just
Yeah.
done two huge
I
hills.
couldn't
And
believe she didn't fall, actually.
yeah,
I couldn't believe.
yeah. All right. So, but speaking of the races, we did have one that made a lot of headlines because Noah Lyles was projected and had to win the 200 meter. He got bronze and said how proud he was of himself because he ran it with COVID. Kind of very scary at the end where the medical staff had to come out, couldn't catch his breath. So that kind of leads us to, interestingly enough, we were already planning on talking about this topic when it became sort of
Mhm.
international news about running with an illness. And so obviously we're not going to talk much about Noah because we don't know exactly what he was going through, but you know about a lot of your clients who go into these races
Absolutely.
and they've been putting their heart and soul into months and months and months of training. And then it's like, well, now I'm sick. What do I do? And Noah chose to race. And that is the current rule is that you get to decide. I mean, if you had the flu,
Yeah.
you could still do it. You just,
Well, it was interesting because Meb talked about it last week. And when Meb said, you can still run at 85%, I was like, oh, I, I guess I had always just assumed that you were kind of out for the count. I don't know why I would have assumed that because I've actually run pretty well sick before, but um, I think it's really interesting that you can still perform at such a high level. Now, I'm not saying go out there and run sick, but some of these Olympians, they only have a chance at, once every 4 years. So you have to decide, do I want to take the risk or do I not want to take the risk? And that's a tough, tough decision to make for all these athletes.
I mean, because even before Noah, I mean, just leading up to the races, I was talking to Deanne and saying how anxious I get when I'm in that going in on a fourth month of training for a marathon, and it's like, please don't let me trip on something and hurt myself. Don't let me get sick. I'm taking as much vitamin C as I can, but that's after 4 months of training. I can't imagine 4 years of training. I know they do have they do have meets along the way, but for the Olympics, it is 4 years as opposed to the 4 months of training that I'm putting in, and I'm nervous.
Well, and the thing that's scary is when you're at the height of your training, you're at the most risk of getting sick because you're asking your body to do so much. And then in the taper, you're supposed to heal. It's very common for people, like I can't tell you how many. I actually switched my taper from a 3-week to a 2-week taper in the marathon for the sole reason that I kept getting sick like that last week because my body was healing and coming back down off of that stress. And I was always running a marathon with a cold. So I switched it to a 2-week. So I would actually get the cold after the marathon and it actually worked for me. But it's a very susceptible time to get sick because you're asking your immune system to do a lot. So it's very common.
Yeah, so we'll back this up a little bit. So the topic we're doing running an illness and how to adapt your routine because let's put the races on the side for a moment. So let's just say you like to run just about every day. It's something that's in your routine and all of a sudden you get sick. And so now you think, should I go out and run? Should I not go out and run? And so I'm sure your clients come to you. So what is your general guideline?
Yeah. My general, like basic guideline is if your symptoms are from the neck up, you can run easy. That's no big deal. Which means like usually head cold, it's not going to hurt you too much to run your normal schedule. If I would usually skip speed work, but like easy run is fine. if you are experiencing body aches, a really, really tight chest, I suggest not running that day, at least until those symptoms subside. Running with a fever is never a good idea, never, ever. And the reason being, and people don't realize this, is when you're sick, your body is spending every ounce of what it has to heal itself. So it's silly to do a workout, a strength workout or a speed workout, because the way you get stronger in a speed workout is recovering from that workout. So you do the hard effort, you do the stress, you add it to your body, and then your body absorbs it and gets stronger from it. But if you do speed work when you're sick, your body's not going to recover from the speed work because it's so busy recovering your body from the fever or the illness that it's not going to care about your muscles getting stronger. So you're just basically wasting your time doing a speed workout when you're sick. So just don't do that.
Yeah, it's good to know. And I was even thinking, when you talk about that head cold, generally that's what I've always heard. If it's all your symptoms are from the neck up, you're pretty good. Except that sometimes that leads to a stuffy nose, and then it's hard to breathe. And so now even you're
sometimes the run
Yeah.
will help you clear that up.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you have some junk in your lungs, the run will help it get out. But you just really want to be cognizant. And I reiterate this on so many levels because as a coach, they want to like do what coach says, and I got to impress coach. And the reality is you're not impressing coach if you're, number one, not telling me that you're sick, and number two, not listening to your body. That's never impressing coach. So whether you have a training plan or you have a coach, don't be such a perfectionist to that training plan and that coach that you have to prove to the training plan that you can do it, because you're only hurting yourself. The other thing I would say is if you're on antibiotics for anything, ditch the speed work. Again, your body is trying to heal. Your body is trying to heal. You want to do everything you can to get your body to heal as soon as you can. And the only thing you're doing if you add speed work or your long runs and you're adding that on, you're just preventing your body from getting better quicker. So just do what you can to get it done with, because we want the illness to go away so that we can move on.
Yeah, a lot
with
of
the training.
times, we like to be out there almost every day. We feel weird if we're not out there running. But if you give yourself that time, then you can get back out quicker. Whereas if you were to, kind of push yourself and doing a little bit more than maybe you should, then you're going to be sick for just that much longer, because it's going to take your body longer because you're fatiguing it. I mean, and you certainly, don't want that. I mean, you want to get back out
and
there.
Interestingly enough, here's where that consistency piece comes in too. So if you've been consistent over the years, a week or two off isn't going to bother you at all. You can train, get right back on your training. You don't miss anything. Even if you take 2 full weeks off, you're not going to lose anything. So if you've been consistent over the years, you trust the training. I just had a girl run the Paris Olympics course, Carla Holt, and I told her.
So let's talk about what the Paris. It's the marathon for all and this is the first Olympics that's ever done this, and I hope that it continues. So it literally
it's
meant
so cool.
It's for everyone. So the men ran a marathon 26.2 mile course one day. The women ran it the next day. At 9 p.m. between those two, there were 20,400 people, right? 20,240 people. So that's 2024, and got to run it. Anybody, if they won the lottery, got to.
Yep.
I mean, just fast, slow, indifferent. Like you were out there running that same course.
And one of my girls won a lottery spot, which she did. I think she found out last summer, if I'm remembering correctly. And I remember when she found out, we were so excited. We were like, oh my gosh, you're the luckiest. And after watching her, this whole process, and we'll get into that process, it was so interesting to me because again, a life metaphor, right? Like in happy things, there always can be some things that come up, right? And that doesn't make the luckiness of her winning that any less. There's highs and lows. She actually ran the New York Marathon in November, but got COVID again. And she's had it multiple times, but she got it again after the marathon. And again, I think part of the reason why she had such a hard time with COVID is because she ended up running the marathon with COVID, and that was tough on her immune system. So She ended up getting long COVID. And here we are with this lucky bib in a situation where she's so unlucky that she got long COVID. And
Yeah, almost
when
10
I tell
months,
you
almost
she
10 months
struggled.
later. Yeah.
Yeah, she struggled. And so, I mean, she was so good about it. She took, I think, 3 months off completely, slept, did everything she needed to do, went to see doctors. And we started her back slowly. And she still had setbacks. Like if we went too far, we knew we went too far. And so we'd have to pull her back. And I literally, we relied basically on her old marathon training to get her through this because I would say if you have COVID, do not run a marathon. Don't run a marathon with COVID. It's too much for your immune system to handle. But in this situation, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I was not going to be like, no, we're not doing it. So we just did the bare minimum to get her through. I think she did 1 2.5 hour run. That was it. A couple hour and a half runs, maybe, 1 2 hour run, but we didn't even make it to 3 hours. And she was terrified. And she got to the start line semi-healthy. She's probably, I would say, about 75 to 80% now. And she had a great marathon. Of course, she didn't PR, but she had a really strong marathon. She felt good the whole time. She enjoyed the race, which at the end of the day, with an experience like that, that's what we all hope for, right?
She had a live video as they ran past the Eiffel Tower right around 10 o'clock where it's all, it lights up every night. And I was like, that is worth it. I mean,
it is worth it.
I mean, I know it was, she was so scared. I talked to her back at the end of July and we were just like, whatever you do, we are jealous and proud because just getting over there and getting to be a part of it is so is so rewarding. And then for her to actually have done well on that very difficult course. Have you talked to her since then about those hills?
I haven't talked to her yet. I did tell her she needed to walk up most of the hills. She's kind of overwhelmed right now. She doesn't really have the words. I'm sure I'll talk to her when she comes down a little bit. I briefly talked to her over text, but yesterday I told her the thing that I was the most excited about is a lesson that I know she learned that so many people never get the chance to learn. And it's that you can have the most perfect training cycle in the world and have a bad race. And you can have the worst training cycle and have a good race. And you can have injuries come up and have a good race. And you can have, just because everything goes perfectly does not mean that you're going to have the day that you think you're going to have. And I have seen so many people quit because they're afraid of failing because of things that happened in their training cycle that really don't mean anything. And they've decided that it does. So because she said to me yesterday, she said, I don't know. I had so many things go wrong. I don't know how this is possible. I didn't sleep the nights before. I had so much anxiety. I don't know how I did this well. And I'm like, the body's amazing. It can do a lot more than you think it can do. And so it's a pretty cool lesson to learn that early on.
Because so her husband posted wonderful things about her and in this race, and then they got to actually go and see some other events in Paris. So it was a beautiful experience, especially because of how surprised she was at herself.
Yeah, I mean, we can do so much more. I was telling her yesterday, I got the swine flu. Do you remember the swine flu?
H1N1, baby.
Yeah, that was crazy. It was the week before my 2009 Chicago Marathon. And I had a pretty rough training cycle. I'd had to have a vein removed, so I'd had to take time off for that. It was hot. It was a really extra hot year. And the week before, Abby came home from school with the swine flu. And my coach was like, oh, don't go near her. You can. And I was like, she's my baby. I'm going near her. Like this marathon is just not as important to me. I'm not getting money on this marathon. So of course, like Wednesday, I got the swine flu and I had a fever, and I'll never forget it because Thursday of that week, I used to teach boot camp at 5:30 a.m. And I was so mean. I used to tell my boot campers if they were late to class, I used to make them run ladders Well, Luke was traveling that week and my babysitter didn't show up in time. And so I was late to boot camp to teach. And all of my people were like, Coach, you got to get on the line and run ladders. And I started running ladders because, I practice what I preach. And I could barely make it through a ladder because I was so sick. And I'm like, how am I going to run this marathon on Sunday? I don't know how I'm going to run this marathon. And then Friday, I woke up and my coach took me out for a 3-mile run and she ran me hard. And I was like, why are you running me so hard? And she was like, I want to get this stuff out of your lungs. And I'm like, you're crazy. And got home from that run and thought to myself, I'm stupid to go. I should not go.
Because you also have to fly. You have to fly there.
Yeah, I had to fly. Those were the only 2 runs I did all week. I was tired. I was sick. And so I just slept as much as I could Friday. She said to me, we'll go out to the race. And if you don't feel good, we'll get off at the halfway mark. It's no big deal. Well, to this day, that's my fastest marathon.
Which is so shocking. Do you know why?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Do you know why? Like, do you know?
A couple of things. One, I think I rested all week. I kept my carbs up. I rested all week. And I think often I was just a little bit overtrained going into races because I was a little insecure at that age. And then the other thing I think was I took the pressure off myself. And so I said, it's where I learned the negative split. I said, I'm just going to go out there and see what I can do. And if I don't feel good at the halfway mark, I'll get off. So I started the marathon 20 seconds slower than I would have started normally. And then by the halfway mark, I was like, wow, I feel amazing. And then I pushed the pace and it's still to this day, my fastest race. So I tell people all the time, like illness, it doesn't define you. I had worked years and years at my marathon. And just because I missed a week of training or I was sick, doesn't mean anything. I mean, it can mean something, but it's not as scary as you might think. That's all.
and it is. I mean, well, and the anxiety of it, and then can also, you start worrying, that cortisol level goes up, and everything sort of goes into that fight or flight mode, and that's another reason why you can sort of manifest the sickness because you're so worried about not getting sick.
Well, and I'm sometimes really hard on my clients the week before a race because our brains go there, and I'm like, stop worrying about things that you can't control. You can't control if you get sick. You actually can't. And the more energy that you give it, the more stress you're putting on your body, the more cortisol you're throwing at your immune system, and the less protection you have. So to stay calm the week before the race, you can't control flights. The only thing you can control is your attitude toward it. You can control, this isn't a big deal. I'm not getting paid for this. So we can switch the flight, or this is not a big, and people get mad. They're like, I am who I am, coach. How can you make me be something that I'm not? I'm like, no, I'm just telling you, if you want to run your race, you want to save the cortisol for the day of the race because that's when you need it. And if you've wasted all of this energy the week before, you're going into your race tired, you're going to run a bad race. Like that's going to happen. So try to only control, and you're probably going to get sick.
You're probably going to get sick.
Yeah. You're likely going to get sick if you're stressed out about getting sick. Yeah. I hate to use the whole manifestation thing, but it is true. You're going to get sick. So I think, and it is a time, like a lot of times I've run marathons with colds, and it's not the end of the world if you have a cold.
Yeah.
And it's not the end of the world if you didn't sleep the night before your marathon. That doesn't mean you're going to have a bad race. A lot of people don't sleep the night before their marathon. It just doesn't mean it. But of course, now we have all this sleep anxiety because it's like, we know how important sleep is. And now I'm going to have a bad race. But again, we're manifesting it.
Well, and it's not that while that morning or that night might not matter, how much sleep you got through the entire training cycle is way more important than that one night. Because if you've allowed your body to rest and recover and get back out there, then you're going to have a stronger body versus if you didn't sleep the one night before, as long as you did sleep the weeks leading up to it.
Yeah. And again, you're better off going into a race 20% undertrained than 2% overtrained. You will run a better race 20% undertrained than 2% overtrained. So you really want to be cautious of pushing yourself over that line. And I would argue, the last few weeks of training, you're kind of sharpening your pencil as sharp as you can get it, right? Then you taper. Well, what happens when a pencil gets really sharp?
It easily breaks.
It easily breaks, right? So you got to ride that like really skinny tip that's not going to, but not break it. And it's a challenge to do. Um, and if I would say, if you got sick in your taper, you probably pushed a little too hard. So now we know what to do next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so as people, again, listening to this, is there, when, I know you're going to tell them that you can't really give those exact details, but when should you not run? And then when would you know when it's okay to come back? So you're saying definitely no fever. So that's like
Yeah, no fever, no
okay.
running. When you're coming back, because a lot of people have asked me, what do I do when I come back from COVID? Because COVID is an interesting, I mean, we all know that it's an interesting virus, but I have seen everybody acts completely differently to that virus. And
each time you get it, it's different.
Yep,
Like if you've gotten it
it's
multiple times, your body reacts differently.
the things I see that are the most common, I see people have elevated heart rates for 4 to 5 weeks after they have COVID without symptoms. So I would say, and the research says, if that's you and your heart rate is high, you can still run, but you do need to listen to your body. Your body will tell you what to do. So the rule of thumb is when you're coming back, make sure that I always start with a 20-minute run. 20 minutes. If you feel energized after that 20-minute run, then you can add a little bit more the next day. If you feel like you need to take a nap after that 20 minutes, that was too much. You're not ready to run yet. So your body will tell you, and it usually tells you with sleep, because sleep is how you get stronger, right? So, or if you get through the day and you feel like you need to sleep 3 days because whatever you did for a workout was so hard, that was too much for that workout. So you're going to have to back off next time. You weren't ready for it. So really, and you might have to do things a little different each time. Like Carla, she would have a couple good weeks and I'd be like, oh yes, we can go with training. We can go with training. And then I'd give her a workout, or she ran a race and she had a 3-week setback after the race, because even though she felt great during the race, she couldn't recover from it. So it was like 2-3 weeks of just like, oh, I got to back off. I'm so tired. I have a brain fog again. So you're not being a hypochondriac. You got to listen. And remember, pushing through it is only going to make it worse. It's not going to make you tougher and stronger. And, oh, I can say I'm tougher than everybody else because I ran through illness. That's not, it's not going to help you. So don't do it.
So we, a lot of us do use some sort of heart rate monitor on our watch, they have rings, we have all the things. Is there something we can be paying attention to on our heart rate that would help judge, or is it just that's going to be high and we have to see how we feel versus the actual data?
Yeah, heart rate's tough, because especially in Florida, because it's always elevated in the summer. So it's hard to tell if you're sick. I had another runner just recently get COVID last week, and she had just come to me and said, hey coach, I'm feeling run down. I'm feeling really burned out. I've had a lot of family things going on. You told me to come to me when you're struggling. And so here I am. So I backed her off to 30 minutes every other day just because she was run down. Then she came back with a COVID test. And I was like, oh, that's why you were feeling that way. So it's not necessarily, I mean, her resting heart rate was high. So, and the elites swear by their resting heart rate. I know some elites that won't run if their resting heart rate is 5 beats higher than it normally is, because that means they could be getting sick, and they're just not gonna, if they have a competition or they have a race, they'll just say, I'm not going to do it, depending on the importance of the race. Not typically with the Olympics, but in any other kind of race, they'll just pick a different race. Because they know that their body, if their resting heart rate is high, their body is telling them, hey, look out, there's something coming.
Because it's trying to it's trying to fight. It's trying to fight the thing in your body before you even know. So yeah.
And interestingly enough, the Whoop, that band that you wear on your arm, sometimes you'll see people with it on their arm.
Yep. I've never had it, but I did.
Yeah. Now I think Aura Ring is getting more popular because it's more comfortable to wear. But when COVID first started, Whoop was telling athletes they were getting COVID before doctors were telling them, because of their heart rate.
Oh, wow.
And so there were a couple of golfers that found out they had COVID through Whoop. because they were like, something's off. And then they went to the doctor and found out. So you can tell a lot by your heart rate. But again, when you're coming back from it, you can't really pay attention to heart rate because it could be elevated for 4 weeks and you could be just fine. Some of the research that I've seen, if you've had long COVID, is when you come back, it's good to go into like a 5K training cycle where you're really doing shorter, faster intervals to get that heart back going. And you're kind of laying away from the longer stuff that's harder on your body. Some of the research has been saying go for it. So, but less miles, shorter, faster stuff.
That would make sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense actually.
Because again, those longer runs can really sort of, just kind of break you down so much that if you and if you're doing these shorter ones, also I almost think that they're sort of if you are feeling well, it will give you some confidence. Like, oh, I can. Yes. Meanwhile, if you're running the long slog, you're going to feel rough at the end no matter what. But if you're doing sort of a fast, quick mile, you can be like, okay, I'm back.
Yeah.
It gives you some mental confidence as well.
And it's just not as hard on your immune system. Mm-hmm. Any run over 2 hours is really hard on your immune system. We as marathoners are like, oh, we're doing the most healthy thing ever. And I've said it numerous times on the show. It's just not healthy to run marathons. Am I going to stop running them? No. But if you're going to ask your body to do things, you need to know that it is harder on your immune system. So what do we do to protect that immune system? I happen to know a lot about this issue only because I had cytomegalovirus after I had Abby. It didn't cause me any trouble for 10 years, but then in my 30s, it kind of started coming back because I was marathon training.
And what does that do to you? What is the?
It's a virus similar to mono, and I actually had mono as a high schooler as well. And actually, with mono, I make everybody on my forms when they fill out a form to coach with me, they have to tell me whether they've had mono or not, because I do have to train people that have had mono differently, especially in Florida. Because it's so hard on your immune system, it's very easy to reactivate the mono in your system. So you have to be stronger about recovery. You can't give people as many miles. You have to be really on hydration. But I think for me, I unintentionally was under eating for the amount of miles that I was running, even though I've always felt like I was pretty good about it. We didn't have the research we have now. So I was unintentionally under eating for the amount of miles and the efforts I was giving. And I kept getting cytomegalovirus again. And I would have to take 3 months off to let my body rest because you can't get over it without rest, unfortunately. So it is a virus similar to mono. And the Florida training didn't help. So in Florida, we just have to be extra cautious about our vitamin D. We have to make sure that our vitamin D levels are high enough. With that, we also have to make sure our iron is high enough. And the hardest part about that is 90% of the population is vitamin D deficient. And vitamin D is what helps you absorb iron. So if your vitamin D is low, it's very difficult to keep iron in your system anyway. So, and both of those things low raise your cortisol, which in turn is tough on your immune system. So as you got to be really cautious about what you're asking your body to do with supplements, number one. Number two would be absolutely sure you're eating enough. You gotta, like, I would err on the side of overeating to undereating every day of the week, because your immune system, you're asking your immune system to do a lot when you're asking them to run 3.5 hours in the heat in Florida in the summer in August. So give it every fighting chance it has by fueling it properly. Do not eat low carb. That's also hard on your adrenal system. It's hard on your immune system. If you eat low carb, you're almost always going to get sick. That's one of the, precursors to that. Hydration, salt, all the things we talk about, but just make sure that you are extra cautious if you have mono or have had mono in the past, because it is a virus that stays dormant, or is supposed to stay dormant.
Until it's not.
until it's not.
Because when I finally found out that my iron was low, my friend, a different Carla, said, that's why you've been getting sick all the time. Because in the 6 or 8 months before, I'd had a stomach virus, I'd had COVID, and I was like, ugh. And she's like, that's why you've been getting sick all the time. And I had, I was just beginning to learn about all the things now that I know about, and I just had not equated those two. And I certainly, now I'm a little more acutely aware, but that running could cause those ferritin iron levels to go down, and that would then hurt my immunity, so that I was constantly getting sick in those 8 months.
It is actually a warning sign for me. If I have people that are getting sick, if you have more than 2 colds in like a 3 or 4 month period, I almost always am like, is your vitamin D low? And then if I know if their vitamin D is low, their ferritin is low, almost every time. So it is something you pay attention to, right? Just kind of look at the whole picture. You should be feeling most of the time pretty healthy. Like, of course, in Florida, there's not a day that goes by in the summertime that you're going to feel good on a run, really. Like, you're not going to finish. I ran 4 miles this morning. It was 78 dew point, and I ran 11-minute pace, and I was like, man, that sucked. Like,
I wish
I was happy
slower.
to be out there, but I'm like, it doesn't matter how slow you go. It's still like, one of my new runners, he's like training for his first marathon in the summer. And he's like, what do I do, coach? What do I do? And I'm like, I hate to tell you, but there's not much you can do. Like, you got to, run your checklist. If you're doing all the things, you just kind of have to be like, we're slogging through in August, right?
Except there's going to be this, the forecast is low humidity for 2 days, Friday and Saturday.
2 days, baby. I know. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's
awesome.
very rare in August. But so hopefully all the long runners on Saturday morning will, it's still gonna be hot, but it's not going to be as miserable.
Absolutely.
So
the other thing about the immune system is it needs some downtime.
Yeah.
So what I tell people is the back-to-back marathons or the back-to-back distance races, it's just not a good idea. It's not a good idea. Unless you don't really, I could say if you're running them slower, it's not as hard on your immune system.
But it was
you don't care about the time.
It was hard on mine, even when one of them was not.
Yeah, but your iron was low.
Yeah.
If your numbers are fine, and I tell people twice a year, get your numbers checked. If your numbers are fine and you're running easy, it's not going to kill you to run multiple marathons. But if you have a time goal and you really want to put in those really hard training days, 2 marathons a year is about it. And even one of my girls, she's like, I will race one and I will run one for fun every year. I'm just going to race one a year. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah. So to each his own, but I would like to protect our immune system because it saves our life.
Well, yes, it does. It could quite literally save your life if you don't get one of these illnesses. But it also preserves your quality of life, meaning you're not constantly taking time off from running or having to call in sick for work. And it's like you can go back to just a quality of life where you get to do all the things that you want because you're staying healthy.
One thing that I really do like that came out of COVID, if you could find some things to like from COVID, was that there's a lot more research on this. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more research coming out on viruses and what viruses do, because I've had to kind of be on my own and try to figure out how to do what I want to do and keep the virus at bay. And it's trial and error for me. Sometimes I get it right. Sometimes I get it wrong and I get it again. And some of these viruses and long COVID can take a year to 18 months to feel better. So we don't want that. That's a good thing that came out. And then I think I've noticed that people are more apt to stay home if they're sick.
Yeah.
Which it used to be before COVID, you were kind of lame if you called out sick. And now it's like, okay, maybe I should not go to work today. And the reality is because nobody around you wants to get sick. Right. So if you're sick, stay home if you can.
And then you also get better faster.
You're not getting a badge of honor if you go into work and get everybody sick. Everybody's just going to be like, oh, that's that person that came to work and got me sick.
And as I said at the beginning, I have fallen victim to all the pitfalls because I was the one who, I have done it. I'm learning to be better, but I came to work maybe 10 years ago. It was the year that the flu virus the vaccine wasn't helpful. It did, like,
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
the right strain. And so I came to work, 102 fever. It was awful.
Well,
And
I mean, that's our generation, Leigh,
yeah, and
really.
then they were like, Leigh, so they finally basically kick me out. Like, they call someone else in without even telling me. And then everybody got sick. And and it was like right at Christmas and New Year's. And I was just like,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
really sorry.
I mean, that's kind
Yeah,
of our generation. Our
yeah,
parents were like, you're sick, go to school.
go to school, go to school. I mean, this one I was aware that I should not have been, but you feel like you feel that, oh, I'm hurting someone because they have to come in this crazy hours, and I'll just go in, and it's better if I just go in and feel sick. When in the end, I literally got every single person that I came in contact with sick that year. So because again,
Not fun.
because the vaccine had not worked. So, but I
Well,
digress.
yeah. Well, Ab called me last week on Tuesday and she was like, Mama. And she called me, she said, Mama. And I could hear in her voice, I'm like, you sound terrible. And she's like, I'm so sick and I'm scared. I don't want to call out for sick for work. I never miss work. And I was like, you better call in sick for work right now.
Yeah.
I don't want you to get everybody else sick. And actually, she rested for the whole day. She slept 12 hours and she was fine the next day.
Yeah.
I think they don't realize that if you actually succumb to it faster, it's going to go away quicker. And then you're not dealing with the prolonged effects of it. So,
But yes, we'll tell ourselves that, but our generation will still.
yeah, I know,
They
right?
used to give out the awards for people who never missed a day of school.
I know.
Like,
And I
which
just
meant
can remember.
they definitely went to school sick a lot because kids.
My mom and dad were like, nah, you're not missing school. Nope. Out the door. Bye.
Yeah. So,
Although I did watch Price is Right a couple of times when I was sick. So I must have stayed home a couple of times.
Yes. I sometimes, but not, it was bad. It had to be real bad. And speaking of that, we're going to do our coach's drill, because you know yourself better than anyone. So in our coach's drill today, Coach, you said you wanted to talk about listening to your body.
Yes, and I'm going to have to make this quick and it's going to be hard, but I had a coach that, I'm always about coaches and listening to your coaches, and I have, made all the mistakes, so learn from me. But I had a feeling that I was getting cytomegalovirus again, and I could feel it. And he was like, no, it's probably just in the back of your mind because you're worried about it. And I'm like, okay, I'll push through. So I pushed through and I pushed through. And he actually told me to create a new persona to do workouts so that I could be stronger through my workouts. And I did that. And I ran myself right into cytomegalovirus again. So point being, listen to your body. You know what's going on with your body. And if you think something is off, I would argue that 90% of the time you're right. If something's off, listen to your body. It might not be that you're feeling like bad in your workouts, but it could be that you feel run down or burned out or you're bored in your workouts. Something is off. Listen to your body. Do not let a coach tell you otherwise, please. And I'm a coach.
And you're the coach. And also, and then in the medical field, to go be your own advocate, because they're, a doctor is very much like, most doctors they'll look at the chart, and if you're okay, they're like, well, I don't know what it is. If you can feel it, you got to.
If you suspect something is wrong, you're almost always right. And I can look at your numbers and everything can look fine to me. But if something is off feeling, I'm not inside your body. I can't be inside your body. I don't know how it's going to feel. And in the summertime, like if it had been in the wintertime, this client that had COVID, I probably would have picked it up. But in the summertime, it's really hard for me to see anything. Like I literally am just like, how do I keep them the least amount of stressed? Because it's just not, all the numbers look like horrid.
Yeah.
Like if
it looks like we're all sick.
If I actually did what I was supposed to do by the numbers, I would tell y'all to go home.
Yeah.
Like, it's just that bad in the summer. So you have to be your own advocate. If you feel like something's off, it's off. I mean, I gave Carla a workout last week that I thought she could handle, and she immediately texted me and said, Coach, I don't think I can do this yet. And I did not argue with her one bit. I said, you do what you need to do to get through that workout. If you have to pace adjust more, I tell people to pace adjust in the summer. Each person is different. So if you are typically, if you're from Eastern Europe, which I am, you're going to be less likely to be able to run in this weather at all. Like I'm talking about DNA from a long time ago. If you're genetically from Eastern European countries, then you're just
Colder
not,
climes.
yes, you're not good in the humidity. So don't fight that and just pace adjust a little bit more. Don't be a hero. There's a girl named Elizabeth Clore she has a huge social media following. She struggles with mono. She got herself a treadmill and put it in her basement for the sole purpose of, in the heat months, she notices that that's when she gets her mono back because her body can't handle the heat runs. So listen to your body, figure out what works. And if you go too far, you know where that ends next time, right?
We're all going to be healthy. We're all going to get through August and September, and we're going to feel better, and we're going to be our strong runners, and we're going to through the fall and into the spring, right?
Yeah, we're almost there. We're getting it. We're getting there.
We're getting there.
I mean, I know we got like the worst of the worst coming up the next probably 4 weeks, but
the time is shorter. We don't have to deal with it as long now as when you start heading into this slog in May and you're thinking, I got to wait till October. Yeah. But now we're in August. And
when do the dew points start going back under 75 again?
So we usually say, at least for the Tampa Bay area, if you're listening or watching from somewhere else, it's obviously going to be different. But we don't really get our first noticeable cold front until about the second week of October, and that's when the dew points will drop. I mean, back to about 70. During that first
back to 70.
Yeah, back to 70. So the rest of the country, they're telling their people not to run when it's 70, and we're rejoicing when the
we do. I notice a difference this time of year when it's 73. Like I've started to say, oh, it's 73 dew point. It's not going to be that bad today. Today was 78. I'm like, oh, there we go.
But. And last week that was as humid as it gets. Like we were seeing 81, 82, 83 degree dew points. And you're just like, okay, I'm done.
What? Yeah, you don't see 83 dew point very often.
It was really tropical. So again, now we've gone back down to 80, 78. So it's better. But yeah, so we have a couple more months, and we're gonna keep ourselves healthy, and we're gonna get our rest, and we're gonna drink our electrolytes, and we're gonna take our vitamin D, and we're gonna
we're gonna eat all the things.
We're gonna eat all the things. We're gonna eat the carbs. And we're going to have the protein after we run. So that the main thing is
so much stuff, right?
So much to think about. But it also
like so much.
As opposed to driving your body into the ground, these are things we need to think about.
Yeah, we never want to drive our body into the ground. Right. We only get one body.
All right, Coach.
All right, good to see you.
We'll see you next time.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.